Bonjour à tous, il est 13 heures, on va commencer.
Good afternoon. We are very happy to welcome Didier Leroy and to welcome you, students. Today you are very, well, you are numerous. And this session is reserved to you. Why? Why? Well, because for a few years now, this is the 11th time we are here, we have more and more students coming to the World Forum. They are involved, they are interested in the subjects, because you will be in tomorrow's company, so you want to have new things told to you. So we felt that you should have something really interesting to you, exchange with significant employers, heads of companies. So we have Didier Leroy here. So listen to him. He will be open to all questions and ready to answer them. So I give the floor to Lucille, who will, in a nutshell, tell you about the subject of this afternoon. Thank you. Well, Lucie Janssen, normally I'm working within Alliance Network on sustainable development and the transports between the various activities. And so we have a lot of solutions, but our question is, what will the cars do tomorrow? What is the place reserved to cars in today's economy? We have the Vice President Didier Leroy from Toyota, who will answer this question maybe. Thank you. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to take part in the World Forum and to be here to tell you about a few things like the responsible revolution and Toyota's vision in this regard. I'm not going to advertise my cars. This is not the point. The point is that we want to provide examples. One example of how we can contribute to that responsibility which all large companies have in the world, and also in terms of management, how we do that. But as I said, it's just an example. I won't say that it's the best solution of all. We just have the ambition of revising things, of trying to have a vision, a real vision. We're not in a company that wonders about what will happen next month, what shall we say in our newsletter. So when we talk about long-term strategy at Toyota, we're talking about 2050. In many other companies in which I have had the opportunity to talk about all this, they said, well, 2050, you won't be there anymore. That's right. That's right. But it's a long-term vision with action-taking and decision-makings. So this is what I wanted to say. And as was said before, the important thing is that we should exchange ideas, and I will be open to all questions. Presentation of Toyota, just 2 slides to tell you about our company in the car industry. Challenges, we talked about mobility, but there are many other things like challenges. What do we mean by challenges? And then novelties. What happened over the last years? All the things that have totally changed the car industry and things that have changed our company. So responsible approach. What does it mean for Toyota? Future of mobility and our solutions. Once again, it's our vision. I wouldn't say it is the right vision. It is our vision. And then conclusion, if I were you, what type of questions would I feel like asking? What would I change in today's world? So these are just a few ideas. First of all, how about Toyota? What is it in in the world today. It is 80 years old. It's a company that is working in 28 countries, except Japan. We have a very good balance in the production. For those who've been in the meeting this morning would think it's a multinational company, so you're not talking about a local economy here, as was said this morning. But this is not the case. For us, we have a slogan in our company, which is, we want to be the best in town. The best in town is quite clear. We don't try to be the best in the world. We want to be the best in the place where we are. The best company, the best dealer, the best contributor to the local economy. And behind that, we will be globally efficient, but very often companies try to be #1 worldwide. But when you talk about #1 worldwide in terms of volume, what does it mean? We need to have a certain volume to have economies of scale. But once you have reached that volume, once you have the economies of scale that are required, very honestly, we don't care being #1, 2, or 3. It's nice when we see a lot of competitors talking only about that, and when we see that the media, the Toyota has lost its #1 crown. The objective for us, when you are in Valenciennes, in the factory, we want to be the best company in the region of Valenciennes or in Villeneuve-d'Ascq or whatever. So, and this is true everywhere in the world. 70% of our vehicles are produced outside Japan, and 70% of the vehicles sold in France are produced in Europe. And about 40% are produced in France, with Valenciennes that produces the Yaris. So today we are selling cars in 170 countries. We sell in those countries a little bit more than 10 million cars last year. And once again, the figure maybe is not very high, but what is very important for us is it enough to bring new investments, new technologies? And the answer is yes. So market shares that are significant, the Japanese and Toyota cars account for 47% of the market share, with results that are quite good in terms of financial results. Sometimes we've been criticized also, because sometimes I had meetings with the investors, and the financial analysts said your sales have been reduced compared with the previous year. That's true, because we have invested a lot in new technologies, but it means that you make sure that your company is perennial and that we will not go bankrupt. We have 72,000 Japanese, but we have many more non-Japanese. And then another word about Toyota. What is Toyota in Europe? I've heard a lot about this. I was the first recruited for the starting of the plant in Valenciennes. I was coming from another car make, and when I left, they said, "You are crazy. Your responsibility will be much lower than in the previous make, which was Renault." And then they said, "Are you going to start in a plant like that? You know, a Japanese plant, you will just put the logo and everything will be done in Japan. Everything will come all done," which is totally wrong. And others said, you know, you won't be able to be very high in the company because the Japanese will always head the company. Well, be it in Valenciennes or elsewhere in the company, because today my responsibility is very easy. I say, you have the president in Kyoto, and I am just under the CEO. So the whole business, purchases, plants, research and development, finance, marketing, sales are under my responsibility all over the world. I'm not in charge of the plants in Japan, so that's true. But no one else has that responsibility except the president of the company. And the president of the company 1 year ago said you should also deal with competitiveness. So I'm in charge of Toyota's competitiveness, but a lot of people say France is not competitive at all. But at Toyota, it's to a Frenchman that the role of working on competitiveness has been given. But competitiveness is not productivity. It's just a slight part of competitiveness, and the major part, and we can come back to that later if you wish, the major part in competitiveness is the way you are able to develop human resources within an organization, the way you are able to develop talents, leaders of tomorrow who will really help us make a better world. This is the major stake in the company. A lot of people do not believe us, and I say that's good, because if they don't believe it, they won't do it, and they won't be as good as we are. So as a citizen, it's quite sad that people may doubt about things like that. And if you wish, I can provide you with some more explanation. So we produce 70% of our production in Europe, 128,000 in Europe, cars produced in Europe, and we have people who are working directly with Toyota, but of course there are a lot of other people who are working for the dealers of Toyota. In the car industry, some years ago, we felt that we were faced with 4 major problems. First of all, technological revolutions. We have had a lot of changes that were technological, and this is going along with an environmental policy which is very drastic, that imposes developing new technologies to meet the targets. All this is justified, even if it's drastic. Nobody today can say we can go on polluting when we see the environment in which we are living today and the consequences on the planet. So in terms of technology and in terms of environment, we have a number of evolutions and revolutions that are required. From a cultural point of view and social point of view, many of you do not consider going to 4 or 5 dealers before buying a car, because 90% of the time you look on your tablet, your smartphone, or whatever, and you don't go to every dealer. 10 years ago, a customer was going to at least 5 different dealers before deciding about the purchase of a vehicle. Last year, it was 1 out of 7, and 1.7. That's because very often, because they are not very happy with the first dealer, so they go to a second dealer. But very often, the people know better than the sales force what is in the car. They already have an opinion because they have looked at the sites, and so theoretically they know better the product. So this also is a form of revolution for some jobs. And also economic rebalancing, because we are all countries, that's true, but emerging countries doesn't mean very much, because you have some people which are growing, developing, because there are some fundamental needs that haven't been met, and then you have countries that are stagnating. So the growth doesn't automatically come from Europe or the USA. It may come from anywhere. And when you are a European manufacturer, you must know that. Well, I'm not going to refer to the Dieselgate and the pollution by diesel. We had decided that this 3 years ago, we had decided to stop totally the production of diesel vehicles on some elements of vehicles. With the Yaris, we have no diesel engine. CHL's same thing. Well, that's just because we have decided that we need to question things that we've done in the past. We have to protect the planet, so we can't do things just to meet our objectives. We try to be consistent, and we know that urban traffic is saturated. So many of you say, why should I buy a car? So the sale of cars in cities are down. If you have 5 corridors of buses and 1 corridor for the cars, of course you will say, I don't want to have a car anymore. So in the center of the city, it's not very easy to find a parking space. So saturation of urban traffic, traffic in the city, in some places, in some cities, you can't have diesel anymore. Diesel is prohibited in some large countries, namely in Germany. As from next year, new laws on emissions of CO2, and a lot of loss of credibility for the car industry. When I meet people from the European Commission, they say, well, before you manufacturers, you have been in a logic where you were not able to meet the requirements, and now you are able to meet them. So it means we haven't been drastic enough. So it's like a teacher who would say, I'm not going to congratulate you, because otherwise you won't make any effort. Well, they don't know what this will mean as an impact for the final customer, because at the end of the day, it's always the final customer that pays. So we will make a lot of efforts to have the very last technologies if it saves the planet. But if it's just to show that at the next elections they have been more demanding than before, we don't accept that. So the exhaustion of sources of energy and natural energy, we have realized that over the last years, and be competent and meet the needs of the customers. If we ask the question about social aspects in this room, 80 or 90% of you will be the customer of Uber because it's less expensive. As soon as it is less expensive for you, then you don't follow the same principles. It means that being a driver in a company like Uber is a good thing from a social point of view. So, and new mobility services, because tomorrow maybe you will have more and more sharing of cars, more and more use of cars rather than ownership of cars. and then you don't have to pay for the insurance and for the servicing of the cars when you don't drive your car all year long. So we felt that we had to develop a plan, and we have called it the Renaissance, the Reborn Plan. In our business, which consists in producing cars, is not tomorrow's business. We have the responsibility of providing mobility. Yesterday, I was in Athens. We had a worldwide conference. Well, we were in Athens because it's very important for us to be at the Para-Olympic and Olympic Games. Our objective there was forget that we are a car manufacturer. We are a company that wants to promote mobility with one major objective. Mobility is not mobility on four wheels. We have developed and marketed in Japan since last year an equipment that makes it possible to re-educate people with a heart attack to walk again, and the recovery speed is 10 times higher than we as other people. Some people will say, we won't have any physiotherapists because of you, but you have a large part of the population who, after a heart attack, are unable to walk and move. So yesterday in Athens, we have presented a wheelchair that makes it possible for you to go up and down the stairs without no specific equipment. And the second point, which is important, is that that wheelchair makes it possible for you, when you are on the chair, to stand up, to not stand up, sorry, to be lifted to the same level as the person who is in front of you. So you can look at the person on the same eye level. So all these topics are what we call mobility. So we started with our roots, the values of the company, and this is a good example of what we can do, and we redefine our vision of the future. Very often I say, well, many other friends of mine who are in other companies say that the values of the company are key. The way the management is behaving. It's easy to say, as you see everywhere, man is the most important asset of society. And then I say, it's just enough to go to any company to say that it is just a slogan, and it's a good idea to say it, but you have to really experience it. The management, all the team that is managing the company, and all the people living in the company should perceive that, and somehow then it has a meaning. So we have defined mobility of the future in the following way. First of all, it has to be clean and green. Well, we keep it in English because it's something that has been defined in English. So the objective is to have something that is not only a first target, and then we can say if we have hit the first target, it's enough. That's why we say ever better mobility for all. Because you can always do better. We talked this morning about artificial intelligence. Well, for me, it's very difficult to believe that 10 years ago we had no smartphone. 10 years is so short. When I realized that when the iPhone issued now was iPhone 10 because it was the 10th anniversary, then I realized that nobody had a smartphone 10 years ago. Now it's incredible that you could live without one. So we need to work on something that is not going to stop tomorrow morning. We have to have a long-time mission. So clean and green, integrate all the aspects of the environment, be totally secure. we can't believe that there are so many people killed every year because of car accidents. Thousands of people who are handicapped because of a car accident. So instead of talking about the automatic car that will work, controlled by the smartphone, before that we need to do things that are much more important. Sometimes people criticize saying the others are moving much faster. Well, we want, first of all, safety. Rather than having the last model that will be without steering wheel. So in the first stage, zero accident is our target. We want the car to be connected permanently because many of you couldn't live without looking at your Facebook or whatever. I'm always very impressed when I see people who are always on their smartphone. Then I really, well, you see that I have a phone that it won't ring, but I'm sure that some people of you will put your iPhone on and you will have a lot of calls that are waiting for you. So it has to be practical because you are very lucky, you are young, but it won't last. And that's the only thing we can be sure of. You may doubt of everything, but one day you will be older. Mobility and the practical aspects of mobility will have a totally different dimension. Today, when we talk about mobility for the elderly, we have people saying there is a super service of common transportation in this city. Yes, but you have to go to the metro station. And sometimes you can't walk. So you have to find the right mobility. And when you have a certain age, even 100 walking meters is too much. So if you can find a solution to solve that problem, it's quite good. So when people say there will be less and less cars, the increase of the overall mileage on the planet, if the cars would make it possible for elderly to draw advantage of mobility, while today they can't drive without having the feeling of taking a risk, we would increase the mileage by 13%. So the responsible approach by Toyota. In October last year,
we started launching our approach initiative, challenge 360. I have lots of guys around me who told me, well, you're quite daring. 2050, you have plenty of time to do this. So you're going to start launching a big advertising campaign and then nothing will happen. This is not true because owing to the ambitions of Challenge 2050, zero emissions of CO2 for cars, zero emission of CO2 of a full production chain for our cars, zero CO2 emission from all our industrial plants, a consistent reduction of water consumption, contribution to circular economy, and the possibility to contribute to environmental preservation, even in the automotive industry. When you have such an initiative, such a plan, such a vision, even if it's by 2020, by 2050 that you need to reach it, you need to start now, because this is just tomorrow. So talking about cars, we have a will to say we're going to reduce by 90% emissions. Therefore, we'll have, by 2050, we'll have exclusively hybrid cars, rechargeable batteries which are fully electric, and so forth. But we also mentioned that we wanted to reach zero CO2 emissions on the production chain. It's not a coal-based plant which is going to, of course, supply us with energy. Otherwise, we'll be polluting. Our plants need to be fully supplied with green energy so that we can reach the goal of zero emissions. And just an anecdote. When we talk about technological breakthroughs, here you have the evolution between 2015 and 2016 of battery electric vehicles. And then you have the hybrids, which are rechargeable, and the standard, of course, cars. When it comes to, of course, some countries in Japan have decided to have an economy which is based on an energy based on hydrogen. Hydrogen for different reasons. We can come back to this. So France is not talking about this. Even Air Liquide is one of the first producer of hydrogen around the world. But we've seen that the real breakthrough for us, especially last year, comes from mainly the hybrid technology and not PHEV or BEV. When you buy a hybrid car somewhere in the world, or just to talk about the European market, it's very difficult not to talk about a Toyota or Lexus. We are dominant. Even the Yaris in Valenciennes, 45% are hybrid cars. When we launch this, most of the journalists say this will never work. It will never work. There's no reason why you would buy a hybrid car which is small. But now 45%, this is the choice of consumers. It's not us who are advertising this. It's customers who choose. In terms of future technologies, let's talk about the battery-fueled cars. This is one of the components which allows us to have cars using clean and green energy, provided that we can produce hydrogen in very good conditions. The logic for us has to do with working on a series of activities that lead us towards a hydrogen-fueled society with zero emissions. For this, we're working on buses, trucks, transportation systems such as forklifts, and also we work on home appliances. Japan is particularly interested in hydrogen-based technology. A car such as the Mirai can, while having the battery in operation, if your house is completely disconnected from the electricity supply, with your car, you can supply electricity to your home for 5 days. So imagine that you are facing an earthquake, an act of God, a disaster. And if your car can produce electricity for your house, this is a guarantee that you can keep on living and survive. So this is the right logic for us for the hydrogen battery-fueled cars. Now, when it comes to the other types of cars, we have lots of other solutions. We already have 11 million hybrid cars on the roads. An hybrid car means that we have an autonomy of a few kilometers when it comes to the electric supply. So it's not difficult to switch to electricity. But of course, then we need the right network and the right strategy or infrastructure for it. So we're not so far from a fully electrical car, even if today we have mainly hybrids. We have a partnership. In 2024, the Olympic Games will be in Paris, either for 2020 or 2024. We are the first automotive producer who has signed a partnership with the Olympic Committee, but we also have signed a partnership with both Olympic committees, the traditional Olympic Committee as well as the Paralympic Committee, both. It's extremely important for us. Yesterday in Athens, I was saying, I had tears almost rolling on my cheeks. I was listening to all those athletes from the world coming in their wheelchairs. There's a guy who came, he lost his 2 arms. He lost his 2 arms in a car crash. He of course, had an electric shock, and nevertheless, he can do many things. And then you feel so small. You think what I do is really peanuts compared to the bravery of us people. They're brave and start the impossible. That's what they say, start the impossible. And you'll see that the full campaign will be launching as of next week, has to do with this. We don't care about cars. We're not going to talk about cars when we talk about Paralympics. We just want to say that the contract that we have, the agreement, the engagement, the commitment commitment has to do with working with them on their processes to see how we can help them develop for their sports activities the material, the equipment which allows us to be stronger, to go further down the line, to be more performing thanks to the technological innovation that we can contribute with. And we're not going to ask them to wear a Toyota T-shirt. We don't care about this. The important thing is that, yes, they think, wow, I can trust Toyota, they are supporting us, and this is a company which has real values when it comes to all this. This is why we have this partnership with both the Olympic Committee and the Paralympic Committee. One of the questions we ask them, why do you keep two committees for the Olympic Games? Why is there a difference between the two, Olympic and Paralympic? Because they told us once we'll have a single committee, then we'll be able to really start from scratch and say that we respect all those values. What about the future of mobility? I have defined the four main ideas. Number one, the top priority is to work on the basis of a non-accident or incident society. I'm much older than you are. I have grandchildren. I'm a grandfather. It's not that I'm a father now who has very young children. My children are more or less your age, but I have grandchildren, 2 grandchildren. And I can tell you that I'm traumatized to know that one day those kids may be faced with a tragedy just thinking that they could be involved in a car crash. 2 years old, 3 years old, or 4 years old, they could have their lives completely destroyed to this. Where my son lives, there's a lady who had a car crash while avoiding, a deer on a road, and she was badly hurt, and her 2 kids died in the car crash. This is awful, just because an animal crossed the road and the car crashed. And we are automotive producers. We build cars. We should say people should, avoid speeding up. But this is not only this. This is terrible. To die in a car crash is something that should never happen again. It's not only because you lose your life, but you can suffer. You can be, you can end up in a wheelchair, being extremely handicapped, and it takes a lot of will, a lot of time to build oneself again and start the impossible, as I was saying earlier. So we want to work on that type of logics. And what about our approach? Yesterday, somebody in the room asked me this question. Good, you're going to continue work on safety, but we have a major problem. We want safety to be affordable. That is to say, if you have safety, if you want safety in cars, equipping cars at 60,000, 80,000 euros, fine. Just one part of the population will be safe, and the others, nothing will have changed. We're not keen on that particular approach. We're developing safety for everybody. We have a Toyota Safety Sense, which is undergoing. It's not advertising that I'm making now. There are other brands doing this as well. But we just want to tell you what we do and what are our values. It doesn't mean we are any better than the others. No. The difference that we have compared to many others on this particular aspect is that instead of doing something for the elite, saying if you buy a car of more than 100,000 euros, you have the best safety equipment. No, we say we introduce safety throughout the whole range of cars that we produce. Today, 80% of customers, and this is probably a big mistake in terms of marketing, but many customers do not know today that 100% of Yaris cars, 100% of Yaris cars, not only Yaris hybrid, produced in Valenciennes, France, are equipped with that safety system, which means that today you have a full series of settings, which mean that you limit. We haven't really cancelled it, or we still need to progress, but you limit the risks of accidents thanks to the cars. You have the emergency braking system. You have a system which allows you to keep on track. You can adjust your lights. There's a full series of information which are provided to you on 100% of the range. We don't want today to discriminate people and keep some models and safety for some cars and expensive cars only. Safety should be the same for all customers. We haven't reached that fully yet. 92% of the range sold in Europe are equipped with this system. We still have another 8% to work on. This is available on the Yaris, but not on all the cars. Connected mobility, we've touched upon this earlier on. We're only developing this. It's only starting. And here again, we are pioneers. We are the only ones doing this. It doesn't mean that the others are wrong, but we're developing what we call the Toyota Smart Center. We are developing developing a platform which will allow us by 2020, we haven't reached that level yet, but by 2020, we will have the capacity to have 100% of our cars in most countries, not in all countries around the world, but in all the major countries around the world. Developed countries today doesn't mean that they will still be developed tomorrow, but anyway, cars will be connected. This is what we call DCM, the connection module, which will allow the car to constantly exchange information in real time. This car, let me explain to you what it works, DCM. The car sends every second a piece of information to the platform that we have. And this second worth of information has to do with a group of information which is being sent, but in this group of information, which is sent in one batch, you have all the situations per milliseconds. That means that if you have an accident, we know exactly when, at which millisecond you started braking. Bad news for those who tend to speed up. The police doesn't need to put any speed cameras. All they need to do is connect themselves to the system, and they know exactly when, at what time, and how you have been overspeeding compared to the speed limit. I don't know whether they're going to use the system or not, but the main issue for us will be how we can make sure, and this is why we have developed our own platform, how we can keep those pieces of information confidential, because they are your information, they are customers' information, not coming from the outside world. And then from this, we can launch lots of other activities on the upper level. Lots of people say, well, I never want this. If you have, of course, GPS system, navigation system on board your car, it already has that capacity to store information. When somebody wants to have information about you, a lot of information can be found in your navigator, in your GPS system on board your car. The only difference is that they need to connect to your car, and with DCM, you can have it on a central platform. One day, if your braking system is really wearing out, thanks to a DCM system and technology, you'll be able to know that, yes, you need to change your braking system parts because they are worn out. So I think there won't be a single mobility plan for everybody. It's easy when you live in the heart of Paris to say, I don't need a car. I don't need a car. Why should I bother about the car? But when you live right in the middle of a countryside, 50 kilometers away from the first city, it's a bit more complex. And even if we think that the population is going to be more urbanized in the future, there are still people around the world today who live, in the hinterland and for whom mobility is not as easy as for people living in capital cities. So there's a big difference that will remain between the countryside and the rural areas. There's a difference between generations, and in addition, there is the need to keep this possibility to be mobile, to move around, not only using a car, but you need a mobility solution for people who are aging. It is true that I won't be here to see it, but we now say today that all the young people born at the beginning of this year, 25% of them will reach 100 years if they're born this year. Of course, I don't know whether and how long we'll be able to drive, but when people will reach 90, 100 years old, 110 years old, they will still have the same capacity in terms of reflex actions to keep on driving. So we will need some systems, and we won't be able to tell them, now you need to stay home because you're too old. I'd like to remind you that old people are now in good health. At least most of them are in good health conditions. And then we'll have to supply them other means of mobility. What can we do in terms of mobility? Here you have an example of what I was mentioning in the upper part of the screen. This robot, which allows to re-educate, rehabilitate people when they had a stroke or a heart attack. And this is the lady you can see on the treadmill. And then there's a man who's carrying around a robot. If for some reasons you've lost mobility of your lower, of your legs, for example, here, or you can, of course, keep on walking in normal conditions. So it does assist you to keep on walking. For those who were at the first session, we haven't got the robot, Pepper, but we have something which is not as much fun. It hasn't got fingers that move around, but this little robot has already been commercialized at Toyota. It can come into this room. It He can come into your flat, your apartment, and you need to provide him with a few hours to scan your apartment. And then you sit on your armchair, and then you just say to the Robert, I would like my mobile phone. And the little Robert is going to walk away and come back with your cell phone. Imagine you tell the Robert, I'm thirsty, I need a glass of water. He will go and pick up a glass of water for you. Sorry to give my personal testimony. I was saying that my mother can't move anymore. She's at home. She's no longer mobile, but thanks to my father, who's in good health, he can look after her, but he's very tired. If he had such a Robert, he would be really assisted, and it would allow my parents to keep on living together even longer and not to have one day, because you're too tired or because you can no longer look after your loved one, that you need to go to an elderly home somewhere. It allows you to postpone the time of separation. I think it might be a bit trivial to mention this, but it's very important for me. We work on this. It's not a business-driven approach. We don't do any business on this. The main issue for us is to know how our development from the self-sufficient autonomous car, which has to do with artificial intelligence, add the benefit of the population. Toyota is reinventing itself. What does that mean? Well, the grandfather of Akio Ikeda, who is now the CEO of the company, my boss, used to work weaving machines. And one day, his son said, I think that in order to be able to develop the Japanese economy, you need to switch from looms of weaving machines to another type of business. And this is how they created the automotive industry in Japan. It already existed in the US, in Europe. But Japan said, we are going to become a leader automotive producer. And this is how Toyota started, with the top car, the AA Toyota at the top, which was the first car. The name wasn't really fancy, was it? But it was the first car, which was produced back in 1937. And today the Mirai, which is our last technological jewel or masterpiece, with the technology of the BEV. And then we'll have the teammate concept tomorrow. Mobility teammate concept. You drive your car, but you have an angel, a guardian angel above your head. So if at a given moment in time, you are not vigilant for a few seconds, for half a second, imagine that at one point in time, whatever phenomenon which may happen, you have a physical issue, you have a problem, something which happens, you may have a problem, a health problem, then the system, of course, will help you, will take the lead and avoid a car crash, and maybe will, of course, avoid you injuring the person in the car just in front of you. And then, of course, assisting human beings with disabilities, this is something else we want to do. And from a business point of view, we think that the fact of producing cars and selling cars in the 30 or 40 next years will remain quite stable. The real added value will be created through services and evolution of mobility. And as a conclusion, because I want some time for questions and answers, don't be pessimistic. I had enough of hearing people being pessimistic, saying, well, nothing is going right. Of course, things are not right. But of course, if you don't want to change the world, it's not a matter for me. I'm an old guy to change the world. You have a possibility to change the world. If you're interested, yes, of course, it would be good. You could replace me, of course. You have a job, but you have the power to change everything. As soon as you have a will, when there's a will, there's a way. And if you're ready to fight for it, it will work. When I see some young people that I often meet in universities, in engineering schools, look at their shoes and say, anyway, in companies, we can't change anything. This is the bad attitude. If you react that way, it won't work. You need to be fighters. And you need to be bold, you need to be daring, and innovation today and growth need to be reinvented now. You need to be able to innovate. You need to be able to anticipate. You need to be in a position to share progress. Why? Because this is when we usually use credibility in companies, and also you need to be aware that you need to have a long-term perspective. Think long-term. An economist or a financial analyst told me, is it an advantage or drawback to have the son of a CEO in the company? I said, yes, it's a great advantage. His grandfather was the founder of Toyota. Now he's in the company, and it's a huge opportunity. He doesn't care. It's his company. Whether we make plus 2% of growth and fast, it's part of his culture. His grandfather founded the company. His father made it grow, and now he's at the top. He's the CEO of this company. He's not going to give up just because he's not going to reach a certain level of financial prosperity. He wants to make sure that his company keeps on going. He's not obsessed with shareholding. Think long-term, and don't forget to share progress. Otherwise, your team members won't be motivated. And at the end, in conclusion, be passionate. Be fighters. Be bold. Dare create appetite for new products. When we started working with some friends after our studies, some friends were telling me, I don't care about people, I don't want to manage people. They were very good technical experts. When they reached 30, they all of a sudden saw that the young generations were also very good from a technical point of view. And when they reached 35, they started saying, I'm quite well paid and have no job in relation to this because a 25-year-old guy can do the same. When they reached 45, they were told, see, that's the cupboard. Just sit in the cupboard on the right-hand side because you're not going to be the only one who is going to be put aside. So at a given moment in time, of course, you have a possibility to become real experts, technical experts for a particular specialty, whatever the technique. It can be the sales techniques, it can be law, it can be business-driven, but it's very unlikely that in your career you'll be asked to manage a team. And managing a team has to do, according to me, with being able to give an appetite for people to do things, provide a sense of direction to people who work with you, and you need to be very demanding vis-a-vis yourself. Because if you're not demanding, if you don't follow that particular track, then people won't follow you. So I'm now open to any questions. You have the right not to agree with everything I've said, but I'm open to any queries, any questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Anyway, thank you very much, Didier Leroy, for sharing this vision of the future. A vision which changes the way according to which we usually buy a car. There's a full range of services that you're suggesting with the connected cars, the car without accidents, the accident-free cars. I think you're very sensitive to that notion at Toyota. Yes, absolutely. This is why, as I said earlier on, at one moment in time, the worst, let's say, would be for you to leave this room and saying a guy from Toyota came and did a lot of advertising about the brand for an hour or so. This is not the case. Some things are particularly interesting as well at competitors. But what I want to let you know, the message I want to send across, is the one which was on the last slide. That is, I feel like saying to you, change the world. Make sure this world becomes a better place. And change this world because, once again, you have the passion. You have the will to make new things. Of course, you're going to have to fight with your boss. You might be sacked from some environments because you're too bold, but at least you can be defending your values. And when you have 10 to 15 years of professional experience, at least you'll be able to say that you have kept your direction. You have always stayed on the same track. I'm always, quite enthusiastic. When you work, you're very, very, of course, enthusiastic. And sometimes my wife disagrees with me, but she never says anything. But anyway, it means that whatever your job, you need to be daring. In the companies you're going to work with, you're going to be surrounded by people who are ready to do anything to please their bosses, their chiefs, etc. It doesn't bring anything. And people may say, yes, it was worth something because it allowed them to have a career promotion. But it doesn't. It's no evidence of any success. Even if they let you know that this works, just make sure you keep your own values and let people know that you want to keep those values because this is part of your DNA. And if you don't like it, just move to another company. And if you like it, if you find a good company, you are the one who's going to change your bosses. You will be leading your hierarchy and those leaders, those senior executives. People underestimate the capacity of some CEOs to resist to that type of revolution that may happen internally. When you do it, not only because you want to be peaceful and you don't want to do too much, you want to get to your job in time and so forth, but just because you want to change society. I think bosses are usually very keen on those people, and then you can start changing the world, even if it's at a small scale to start with, but you can change something which is going to lead to a world change. Now over for questions and answers. Georges Couvois. I'm the former president of financial managers at the European level, but must have known you because I was at the inauguration of a Toyota plant in Valenciennes. I was in the bank. I was a banker, and I was in charge of the financing of this company. I have a question to ask you. You've talked about the external world, customers, cars, and so forth. Now, between what I've seen at your company that you did build and design at the time, what have you done? What do you do now for the well-being of employees internally? Because this is also a question which is worth asking. This is something we usually ask ourselves regularly. What about the well-being of employees? Two elements that will allow you to be provided with some elements of answers. Out of let me backtrack. Let me go back in history. I entered the company back in September 1998. First car produced 2001. At the time, we were 800 members of staff. We had taken the commitment vis-à-vis the authorities to create 2,000 full-time permanent contracts. At the end of the year, we had 1,500 of them. At the end of 2002, 200 and 200. At the end of last year, 3,400 permanent contracts, full-time. So if you want to be credible, if you want to have the trust of people you work with, you need to be committed. You need to respect the engagements, the commitments you took 15 or 18 years ago. Now, among the 2,000 people who were part of the first batch of people recruited, 1,600 of them are still at Toyota, and I hope that this will be an element of answer, because since unemployment decreased in the Valenciennes area, it means that if it was a nightmare, as some people must have said in some occasions, I don't think that people are so obsessed about the company without looking to other companies when you have Bombardier and Alstom, which are also in the Valenciennes area. What have we done internally in relation to all this to allow people to feel better at work? Well, the first thing we've done is that we started with a managerial approach, which is very different from what the others did. People always tell me today, but what is the secret? How does that work? And I always feel like laughing when people ask for a secret. Why do they say this? Because when you're facing David Copperfield, who takes the screen, put a piece of cloth over it and make it disappear, you say you don't know how to do it because you don't know the secret. But it doesn't challenge you, does it? But if you have a plant which is here and a second one which is on the side, and if this first plant can work and the other doesn't, well, it means that the others have a secret. Because if you do not accept the fact that the others have a secret, it means that you accept the idea that you're not good at what you're doing. And this is very exceptional in France. People don't recognize this. So then people tell me, what about the secret? What about the system that you have in place to be successful? There's no system, there's no secret. The real element has to do with finding the right people. And we haven't been successful in everything, but you need to find the right people when you do recruitments, the people who are going to be sharing the values that you want to develop in the company, people with values based on the way you can educate people, the way you can give sense. Meaning, when you wake up at 4 o'clock to go to the plant, to work, it's not easy to say, I know why I'm going to work. It means that somehow your work has to be meaningful. You need to give meaning to your work. We need to motivate those people to come to work so that somehow, even if they say, if my job has to do with installing this spare part in the company, in a car, I can tell myself that if, the company is successful, it's thanks to me. It's thanks to my small contribution. I think we've been quite successful when it comes to this. But here again, we have 1,600 people who stayed, but others, were recruited afterwards. Some people left, but usually when you watch television, you have the impression that people stay for 3 months in a company and then they leave because it's a nightmare. No. When I was in Valenciennes, one day I just exited the company, the plant, and a guy, put his hand on my shoulder. I turned around, I didn't know him, and he says, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you about what? I said. Thank you for what? He said thank you because he started as an interim worker and he was just granted with a permanent contract, full-time contract. I told him, you say thank you to me, but I have nothing to do with it. It's just because you worked seriously and somehow people were happy about your work and you were recruited. So I told the guy, don't say thank you to me, it's just the quality of your work that led you to have a contract. No, nothing to do with this, he said. I'm 42. And so far, for all interim contracts, they were telling me, you're very good at what you do, but you're too old. And today, there are lots of people convinced that the company worked well in Valenciennes because we only recruited young people. No, it worked well because we did not only recruit young people. The age pyramid was shaped naturally without optimizing the state subsidies, trying only to recruit young people. No. We didn't do the mistake of another company 20 kilometers of Valenciennes. In this automotive plant, 6 years after the start of the company, most of the people were much younger than half of the people at Toyota in Valenciennes. You need a real pyramid. You need a full range of ages. You need diversity. We are a bit stupid, aren't we? The fact of having just one girl in the team changes the full perspective. It changes the behavior of people. I'm not talking about, sexual harassment and everything we're talking about right now in France. I hope this will stop and elsewhere. But guys do not behave the same way with or without women. So I think somehow we should not ask ourselves a question, say, for that particular team, we'll only have men. No, you need diversity, because the fact of having even one woman can change the atmosphere. We should not always be machos as we usually are, very often are. No, we need to be open. Diversity is key. And at a very modest level, we gave a purpose to the people working for us, and this was important.
Any other question?
Bonjour, par ici.
Les vieux, ça va plus bien clair, donc il faut que...
J'ai une question, elle porte sur
I have a question on performance indicators. In the new vision you have, how about the number of cars sold? Is it an indicator of performance? Are you going to change that or not? Or how? Well, I have an answer to that. The whole business of Toyota, be it on the whole of the planet, in sales, marketing, industrial activities, purchases, but also Japanese market, is under my responsibility. If you ask me the question right now, what is the objective of sales this year, I can't answer. With a difference of about 100,000, I know by 10,000 or 10 million, but I can't give you the figures. So it shows you that it is not an indicator, the only indicator. You know what an indicator is useful to? This indicator helps us with dealers. For dealers, because when you are a dealer somewhere in the world, you want to increase your business. And the growth of your business will come from the sales of cars. But we are impacted in the growth of businesses in some regions of the world, economic sales elsewhere. You see what happens in Korea today. It's not very far from Japan. This may have an impact in some regions of the world. There have been ecological disasters, so that we have totally lost markets. There will be renewal, of course, but you know, it won't be this year. So no, we do not have that indicator as an absolute value. So I said once, when I was at the World Forum here 2 years ago, I think, I was the first one for a speech at the plenary meeting, and I said I have been with Toyota for about 1 year at the board, and never we had a discussion about the stock exchange rates of the company. And the person who spoke right after me said, it's not possible. He is one of the employers of the CAC 40. He said it's not possible. And it's good that he thinks so, because as long as he thinks so, it means that we're not going to be copied by others. But the consequences would be that the number of cars. Well, we always say we want to be best in town. What does it mean? We want somehow the dealer to be so impregnated by the local culture that he will have a better business, he will sell more parts and more cars. But this should be natural. It's not the prime objective. When I became a manager in 2010, before I got to this job in 2015, when I was in charge of Europe, we had awful sales results. Toyota had lost 900 million euros in 2010 by the 31st of December. And everybody was saying it's normal. There has been a crisis in the United States. There have been a lot of other crises. So it's only normal that we have that loss. And I said, can you explain how in one company you can have people who are full of energy, motivated, passionate, when the only motto is trust us? And second element, I have never seen someone saying, super, my boss asking me to reduce my cost by 20%. I've never seen that. I've been working for 36 years only, but it has never happened to me. So it's not by working on those indicators that you will draw all the advantages of a company. I've been fighting all the time we as the people from the finances, from human resources, whom I call sometimes inhuman resources, because they keep these indicators. These indicators should be the consequence of the type of management which we have. So this is the answer to your question, because it's not just the indicator of the volume of sales of cars. It's much more than that. And of course, you will involve more envy. I said creator of envy. You will generate that envy. And very often I say to the people of finance and human resources, when you ask 20% cost reduction, people say it's not possible. We have already done that previously. Now, if you can give them the possibility of being heard. Well, I've done lots of things in my life. I came from the plant when I went to sales and marketing. People didn't trust me. They said that guy has been working on cars and now he will tell us how to sell and market. How can you have credibility? It's 3 stages. First, you try to listen to people, really listen, not sometimes I listen to them like this. Don't forget to vote for me. And no, you really listen to them. You have a contact with them. You look at them in their eyes and you show that you have understood their problem. And the third stage is you decide immediately what actions should be taken, actions to help the person to gain his or her confidence, and not the other way around. When you say, I will come back within a fortnight, I hope you will have solved the problem. No, I should say, how can I help you solve your problem? What can I do? What do you expect from me? What do you demand from me? Don't hesitate to tell me. I think that these indicators are much more important, and I can tell you that the performance will follow. Today, in the various jobs I have at Toyota, that's the way I manage it. I have no competitiveness indicator, but we are in a very performant company. Well, this is the final word, unless there is another question. There is another question. Because after that, we will have another session at 2:30. I have a question regarding your objectives 2050, namely in terms of clean energy. You said that you don't want to use the fossil fuel for your vehicles. So what are the means, the ways to get there? And the following question is, once they are no longer used, do you have objectives of material recovery to generate new riches? You're right to ask the question, because these are subjects about which we do not communicate very much. We have about 96% of recyclable and recycled components on our vehicles. The real complexity we have is that we do not control and master the end of life of the vehicle. If you decide to take your car to another part of the world and it is stored elsewhere, we won't have the traceability to see where you are when you stop using the vehicle. And this is all the more important when we talk about batteries. First of all, because a battery is something that may pollute, and second, it has a value because within a battery you have scarce metals that will avoid trying to find them in the nature. So
Aujourd'hui, nous avons lancé,
today,
je disais tout à l'heure que
we launched, and Air Liquide is
nous avons lancé avec Air Liquide,
a significant
notre société,
hydrogen producer. With Air Liquide, we have launched a European Hydrogen Council. The objective is to think
travailler sur
about working on the green production of hydrogen, have the ability to store it, and have the ability to distribute it. So that's the logic that is followed. We started with 13 companies. We now have 27 of them. And it's something that is controlled in common by Air Liquide and Toyota. We have 27 companies, and some governments are now interested in that. The major objective is that you have today hydrogen produced in several parts of the world, and it is not used. And in that possible resource, we feel that we can reduce the use of fossil resources by taking advantage of that. The plant in Valenciennes, when it started, and people don't know that, and somehow it doesn't mean that we have sold more cars because of that, it's just our DNA. We have never put 1 kilo of anything in the garbage since the beginning, since the day this Valenciennes site was started. When we started with the plant, the average water consumption for a car industry is about 3 cubic meters per car. When we started, we had 2 cubic meters, but then we tried to do better. When I left the plant in 2009, it was 0.7. So they've tried to recover water from the rain, and in this part of the country we have rain. Sometimes they have spent 8 months without buying 1 single cubic meter of water. So that is how we are working on that. Today, a large part of the site in Valenciennes is covered with solar panels. We wanted to put a wind or even 5, but some people have threatened us because everybody wants to use the wind energy, but nobody wants to have the well, I don't know what they have done then, but last time I went to Valenciennes, there was none on the Valenciennes site. So we will have to overcome a few problems to get to 0, but I'm sure we will make it one day. And today, be it in Japan, where we have plants, 2 sites. We have 15 plants in Japan, and we have 2 sites where we have 90% autonomy. We use only 10% of energy coming from the outside, and all the energy is wind energy, solar panels, sun panels, and lower energy consumption. So we will make it. It will take a few years, but we will make it.
Merci.
Voilà, je crois qu'on va clôturer la session. Merci beaucoup, Didier Leroy. Merci pour ce message d'optimisme et de...
Oui, non, mais
merci.
L'optimisme, c'est vous qui devez être optimiste.
You should be optimistic. You should tell me, now follow the youngsters.